Good morning, and you're very welcome to the 17th in our series of Signpost webinars, where we examine the science, policy and advice underpinning farm sustainability in Ireland. My name is Mark Gibson and I'm Programme Manager of Teagasc Connected. The series has been delivered in association with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, the National Rural Network and Food Drink Ireland SkillNet. You can send us your questions by clicking on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available to view afterwards along with a copy of the presentations on the Teagasc website. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Crockett from Dairy Sustainability Ireland and Noel Meehan from Teagasc, the Programme Manager of the Teagasc ASSAP programme. We're also joined by Pádraig Foley in Teagasc in Wexford, who's going to be assisting with the questions later on. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to today's webinar. If I could ask you to unmute yourselves.
Morning, Mark.
Mark, how are you?
Joe, you're based down in Kilkenny this morning. How's all down there?
Well, it's a little bit overcast. Plenty of tourists around the place, and the grass is growing, I can tell you.
Okay, good.
All good news.
All good positive indicators there. Noel, you're coming to us from Ballinasloe. That's where you're based, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Great. Noel, you've been Programme Manager for the ASSAP programme for the last number of years. Could you just give us a quick a snapshot of what the ASSAP programme is about before we launch into the main session today?
Well, I can, Mark. I suppose Joe and myself will probably go into a lot more detail on, but look at the ASSAP programme is a service that's been provided to farmers on a voluntary basis, and its purpose is really to help farmers, put in practices and actions that will help reduce the losses of nutrient, sediment and pesticides to water with a view to improving water quality. And it's a broad collaboration across the industry. We'll get into that in more detail later on, but it's a new way of thinking, a new way of trying to improve water quality. So so far so good.
I think the collaboration is the key word. Joe, would you agree around the ASSAP programme?
It is about treating everybody like they're adults. It's a change from kind of hard enforcement into an involvement in a collaborative process, one with farmers and suppliers, but also with kind of other agencies like the departments, the local authorities, the EPA, Board B, and so on and so forth. It's collaborative.
Great. Okay, so we're going to have a presentation from Joe for starters, and then Noel, you're going to show a presentation after that. So Joe, if I could ask you to share your screen with us, and we will hand the stage over to you for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, and we'll talk to you afterwards, Joe.
Okay, thanks. So what I want to talk about this morning is kind of the ASSAP programme, but also the broader kind of policy background, which sort of is to start with agri-economy, because that's what I became interested in. Then to look at kind of the broad sustainability calls to action, how we establish the Dairy Sustainability Initiative for Dairy Sustainability Ireland, and then to work down through different issues, as you can see there. We're going to start with the agri-economy. So back after the crash in 2008, 2009, the state was trying to work out how it could recover, and in particular, what were the indigenous sectors that you could support. So there was particular focus on agriculture and tourism, as you can see there, and obviously everybody's familiar with Food Harvest and Foodwise, and what they aimed to do. Now, the great news is with those two policy programs is that they were incredibly successful. There was major public policy and private success and great credit practice due to the people who drafted it up and everybody who was involved in making it happen. But I think that provides a template for us, that kind of approach, whole of sector, whole of government, unified around a kind of a set of objectives. That the fact that there was success with those two programs means that there can be confidence that there can be success around the next one, which will really be focused on sustainability. Kind of overarching policy will be due in the next couple of months. I think it's fair to also acknowledge the great success that Board B has been with the Origin Green programme. And that was kind of focusing on sustainability as a supply chain verification process. And it was a major international success and very helpful again to both Foodwise and Food Harvest. So in terms then of kind of the metrics as to what were the economic impacts, all these figures that you see on the screen, all positive, all very, very good, and as strong as could be. So here are also some other metrics in relation to kind of how the sector has grown and the numbers employed and the amount of revenue export that it brings in and the indirect service jobs. And again, the key understanding in relation to this is that when you kind of to consider how is rural Ireland or Ireland outside the cities to develop against the backdrop of legacy FDIs kind of dying out and kind of the focusing of FDI knowledge economy into the cities. The question then is, how does Ireland outside the cities live and survive and sustain in the future? And clearly it is around sustainable agriculture that's really where the answer is. So in terms then of kind of the impact of milk alone, this figure blew my mind when I saw it, that it's 2.6 billion in checks to farmers alone in the 26 counties in 2019. And when you break that into a county by county figure, again, it becomes staggering. For Cork, for example, for dairy gold, I think it's 500 million per annum in checks to the farmers, again, on the back of kind of very hard work being done by the farming sector to make that happen. But there is no FDI company delivering checks worth 500 million to the Cork economy. Likewise, for the big dairy counties, you expect good numbers there for Tipperary and Kilkenny, and they are true. But even for the likes of Laois, I think the figure is 70 million per annum coming from Glanbia. So these are kind of important economic development and economic sustainability pillars, and they should be understood as such. But like economics on its own is no good to anybody unless it's sustainable. And clearly there have been very significant calls to action for the 5 sustainability pillars that you can see there that people would be familiar with from the recent presentations, of which obviously as well soil productivity is a key pillar, because we know that only about 14% of the soils of Ireland are at peak productivity, and that's from Dr. David Wall. And even though that number has been kind of gradually increasing, there's still there's a good distance to travel in relation to improving soil productivity and therefore improving farm incomes. The other interesting thing about the sustainability pillars is that if you start to fix one, you start to fix them all. So there are commonalities and interdependencies and co-benefits. So there is now kind of an emerging view that the more joint approach that you have to farm sustainability, the more beneficial it is across the entire 5 sustainability pillars, and that there are benefits for the environment, for farmers, for business, and for the economy if we get it right. And of course, we have to get it right. So now we have kind of new strategic calls for action, of which the most significant, obviously, is the very big assets in the programme for government under all those headings. The EU Green Deal would be familiar with, Farm to Fork, familiar with, CAP reform and eco schemes familiar with. But the latest one to come onto the runway, for want of a better description, is the recovery programme from Brussels, which has been kind of talked about over and signed off in recent days. What isn't really well understood, and it is kind of only emerging, is that they're now talking about that as a green recovery, a green economic recovery. So that's another dimension to all of this. And as well, obviously, for dairy farmers, the derogation review will be commencing kind of imminently with the next week or so, with public consultation launched by the Department of Agriculture. But when you put all this together, it amounts to very significant asks for agri and for agri-industry. And therefore, systemic responses are needed to surpass and overcome these particular challenges. So just to give some background in relation to Dairy Sustainability Ireland, it started out as a Dairy Sustainability Initiative. And it started from a kind of a premise that environmental sustainability and economic sustainability are complementary. Now, our understanding of that has actually changed since the programme started. And we now are of the view that actually there is the same thing, that economic sustainability and environmental sustainability are the same thing. You can't have one without the other. So this was kind of the first agri-industry sustainability involving the whole of government and whole of sector, that's the dairy sector. And it was set up to address water, soil and air quality, climate change on a multi-annual basis to start us down the journey of the food-wise sustainability objective. These are all the kind of participants, very broad church, you can see on the top line are all of the companies that are involved. Second line are all of the farm bodies, and third line are the government agencies. And really sort of the intent, so these are the kind of the dairy companies that are involved. And again, they're all the principal players, as you'd expect, and familiar names to all of the farm community that would be looking at this. So these were the kind of principles that we were trying to embed. Starting on the left, that would be whole of sector, whole of government, that would be collaborative, and that be agreement on common plans and objectives. That the Dairy Sustainability Forum would provide an opportunity for discussion of new ideas and issues and sharing of everybody's perspective, that it would involve stakeholder consultation, and that there would be particular subject matter experts brought in from the outside to help thinking, and for us all to have a kind of a common agenda and a common platform to see what was coming down the track. And then that things could be developed from there. But again, this was another underpinning understanding. In other words, that there was a kind of an overlap between what the regulatory side, the government side, was looking for from regulatory risk and new laws and so on for new policies, to what the market was looking for. The market, whether there are consumers in Asia or in America or anywhere else, or business to business companies, they're looking for evidential sustainability requirements, and also that then brings into question as to permission from society to operate. And then that is also, as I mentioned, linked to on-farm productivity, because soil productivity is so low. There's a major opportunity there, which previous speakers have referenced. So there's an overlap between these three understandings. And this is the essence of it, that company sustainability, farmer income, and environmental outcomes are all kind of interlinked. So that brings us to ASSAP, and ASSAP was a part of the second water catchments program. And the idea was that there would be 30 sustainability advisors, 20 from Teagasc, 10 from the processing co-ops. The 20 from Teagasc will be funded by the Department of Agriculture and by the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government, alongside 35 scientists from the local authorities and 12 community advisors, all trained together to the same standard by the EPA. And that has now been operating for 2 years and has been good progress. It is a unique public sector industry sustainability initiative. There's nowhere else like it, but it is only a pilot program. It is only small, and it is only just starting. 2 years is really very early days. So these are the companies that are involved in it. Again, all very familiar names. It's 9 processing co-ops, so all kind of very good contribution by those companies. They all have their own sustainability advisor, and they all have networks around them in their individual companies with big buy-in from the executive and from the boards and so on and so forth. So they have been operational now for the past 2 years. We had an interim ASSAP report just recently, and again the core principles that you'll see, and again I think it's fair to call out the Department of Ag and the Department of Housing, processing co-ops, Teagasc, LawPro, farm bodies, farmers themselves, and also good support from Board B and the EPA. And also to pay tribute to Noel Meehan himself and to Carol McCarthy, who's leading on the LawPro side. And collaboration is not an easy way to do business, but actually it's paying off in this instance. So we have a philosophy that there's a kind of unique approach for dealing with each farmer's land is different. It's not one size fits all, and it's the right measure in the right place, and it's an alternative to enforcement, and it's free and confidential. So that's kind of what ASSAP is about. So then in terms of the principles that sort of flow from those in terms of possible options and approaches to responding to the new significant calls for action that the state and the EU and business is looking for. So again, the key really, to my mind, is scientific standards, that if we're to respond to the programme for government, the Green Deal, Farm to Fork, the EU Green Recovery, CAP reform, it has to be to a scientific metric. And it really has to be whole of government, whole of sector. Joined up policies, programmes, grants, public and private, that this really has to be a very full collaborative, integrative process, joined up and agreed strategies, joined up and agreed messaging, communications, knowledge transfer. And it should be developmental, it should be positive, it should be progressive, building on the ASSAP principles. In other words, that if people are sort of feel that they have to do this, because somebody has their arm up behind their back, that's no good. It really has to be wholehearted on this, because there's such great wins to be achieved from it. So, and to apply the same developmental approach, processes, resources and structures as Food Harvest and FoodWise delivered, in order to get the very big results that everybody's looking for. So these are kind of the core strategies that flow from the Teagasc MAC curve in terms of taking the MAC curve and turning it into strategy and possibilities. So the first bullet point there you'll be familiar with in terms of N reductions on farm nutrient management planning, widespread use of clover, more lime, and so on and so forth. Those are kind of the key elements. So the co-ops with Teagasc, the department, are developing a first phase, which we will be rolling out later on in the year, which was 5 switches, to reduce chemical N, improve lime, oversow clover, those sorts of things. And again, I think sort of the question of the integration of sustainability advisory knowledge transfer, a little bit of rural woodland on farms, shelter belt stuff, repositioning of commercial forestry, energy reductions. And the numbers financially for this kind of stuff are very big. The bioeconomy EU is 10 billion alone, and we now know there's multi-billion elements of that kind of been talked about previously. But it has to focus on water quality, greenhouse gases, ammonia, biodiversity, and soil productivity. In terms of elements to make it happen, I think there has been kind of discussion around where sustainability bonuses would fit in. Dairygold have brought in a sustainability bonus. Glanbia have brought in a biodiversity bonus. So I think that part of the policy mix will have to be considered. The question of what advices and support you'd give to farmers to guide as to how this should happen. Obviously, the review of ESTAS I think is an opportunity, but the key requirement is the mainstreaming of sustainability into how everybody does business, not as some separate thing, not something that's external to the process. It has to be internal. And really it points to an alignment of sustainability, public and private. And then it points also to the need for the beginning of coalition building and integrated supportive sustainability strategies that agencies need to work together. There can't be kind of solo runs, working with the farm bodies, working with the departments, working with the local authorities, working with the EPA, working with Board B, working with the farm bodies, all the stakeholders in order to get the right thing done. And I was very taken by this in the Ag Climatise document, talked about new partnerships. And it particularly referenced the Dairygold Milk Supplier Sustainability Bonus and the Glanbia Ireland Keepack Calf to Beef Club, which I thought were really interesting. And it also pointed to the urgent need for similar type programs and using current partnerships to move things on. This is kind of the last slide. NEST produced a research paper on this last year with a very heavy hitter external professor coming in from Columbia, Professor Charles Sable, director of NEST, Rory O'Donnell, and also Dr. Larry O'Connell produced this very fine research paper. And they said they looked at all of the entire dairy sector, Teagasc, Board B, ESTAS, the Sustainability Initiative, Smart Farming, and said, look, you have all the different elements there to make great things happen. And in the very last line, what's relevant, and it said, well, might it be that in the moment of our need, we happen to create the novel organizational resource which to learn by deliberate self-organization to solve the environmental problems we face. And I would recommend that people would have a look at that, because I think there's very good stuff in there. So in terms of what does success look like, and it has to be success to scientific standard. Foodwise had this statement in it in 2015, and I think it catches really the essence where we need to go. That we have, in second bullet point, we have to address and surpass the significant challenges for the sustainability pillars if the economic gains are to be achieved. And it says, third bullet point, significant effort, scientific evidence, and ambition for Ireland to be a world leader in sustainable growth as a market strategy. And I think that really is the essence of it. So just to say thanks to all the farmers and suppliers who are working with this, all the supporting departments and agencies, Teagasc and local authorities, the farm bodies and the companies, and say thanks very much indeed for listening.
Joe, thanks very much for that. Excellent presentation, a good overview of the ASSAP program and the wider Dairy Sustainability Forum. So Noel, I'm going to ask Noel to get his presentation ready, if you're there, Noel.
Yeah, I'm here.
Your camera with us. So just a reminder to people that you can submit your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We've had a few inquiries as to whether the presentation will be available afterwards, and it will indeed be on the Teagasc website, along with the recording of today's webinar will be available on the Teagasc YouTube site. So a good resource. We're getting good feedback from people, particularly in the education sector, that this is a good resource, useful resource for teaching purposes. So do feel free to have a look at the playlist available on the Teagasc YouTube channel. Noel, you're all ready to go there, so we'll ask you to give your presentation, and we will talk to you afterwards.
Okay, thanks Mark, and thanks Joe for setting the scene there very well. I suppose I'm working with the ASSAP program, and I suppose the ASSAP is looking at agriculture and working with agriculture with a view to improving water quality. You know, there's multiple pressures out there from wastewater treatment, forestry, industry, and so on. But I suppose ASSAP is just focused on the water quality side. Again, I'd like to reiterate Joe's comments about the collaboration. It is what the whole ASSAP is based on, and I think it's important to acknowledge, you know, the contribution of the farm, of the co-ops, the departments, the farming organisations. You know, we're all intertwined together, working with one common goal, which is to improve water quality. I also want to acknowledge the buy-in of the farmers into the programme. You know, they're the key players in this, and they have, so far we have up again 96% of farmers have engaged with us once we've contacted them, which is fantastic, and it goes to show how open farmers are to working with us on this. And like that, I think that's down very much to the way the advisors have engaged with the farmers and brought them along and explained what we're about. So I think that the advisors need to be acknowledged as well for the crucial role they are providing, or they're doing it with the ASSAP. They're providing a confidential service, a voluntary service, non-regulatory service, and you know they're doing that really, really well. Just to move on, I'll give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to maybe look back a little bit at the whole signpost series, particularly the water quality focus part of it, and just to try and tie it all in together. I'm going to talk about how we engage with farmers at a catchment level, and then I'm going to give you a quick look at how we carry out a farm assessment and a farm plan and what we look for. So I suppose just to maybe look back a little bit, the signpost series and the water quality focus, we were looking at, you know, trying to give a picture to all the viewers there over the last 7 or 8 webinars as to what water quality. It's a very complicated field, and you know, we have to try and put all the different parameters together. So we had Ginny Deacon from the EPA kind of giving us an overview of what the water quality is and the trends and the regulatory requirements. We Cara Richards talking about nitrogen and soil interaction and how nutrient is lost, nitrogen is lost from the soil, and Karen Daly did something similar with the phosphorus. And we also had Dara Hulacan and Owen Finton talking about hydrogeology and sediment and critical source areas, with Mark Plunkett and David Wall talking about nutrient use efficiency and improving our nutrient usage. And last week we had Ruth Hennessy from LawPro talking about catchment science. And I suppose what I'm trying to get across here is, you know, these are all the building blocks that an ASSAP advisor needs to have a handle on in order to come up and do a farm assessment and come up with a farm plan. And you know, we have to draw from all of those areas when we're out in the farm and to identify the correct area and the correct issue at a farm level. So it's quite a complex process, but you know, that's what the ASSAP advisors have to do. I think it's important just to maybe reiterate that this morning. So the public and farmer engagement, last week Ruth Hennessy spoke a lot about how LawPro engage with the public through their various meetings and so on and so forth. And it's important that as an ASSAP service that we do the same with the farmers. So we run a farm information meeting at every PAA or every catchment we work on, every priority for area for action. And the whole point of this is to provide information on what the quality of the water is in the local stream, what a farm assessment would look like, what the mitigation actions that we might be asking farmers to do. And this is a very crucial part of it, because you know, farmers want to know why the water in their local stream is impacted. You know, for in their own mind, they may not be an intensive farmer, yet their water quality is impacted. So what's happening there? Once they understand that, they're more open to taking on board the suggestions or the mitigation actions that we might suggest to them. So it's a very important process. and you know, it's something that we need to work really hard on and keep the focus on. So I suppose just to give a kind of how does it work, you know, maybe follow on from what Ruth was talking about last week. You know, the Law Pro, they go out, the teams, they go out, they assess the stream, you know, they do the desk study, chemical, biological, hydromorphological, stream walks, etc. So what they're trying to do there is build up a picture of the catchment. And I'm just going to give you a kind of hypothetical example of one. This is not an actual one, but just to say, for example, for this morning, we have a catchment there, you know, a Vara catchment in Wexford, and you know, if we're looking at a water body here, this Bracken 10 water body, the status of the water is moderate, so it's not reaching the standard of good status. So how would we maybe narrow down where the issues are in that catchment? You know, you have a northern stream and you have a southern stream, so you know, the Law Pro team would do their assessments and it might come back to the southern stream is of good standard. So that would mean that, you know, we don't really need to look at any farmers down this area here. The northern stream, you know, when they go assessing it, you would see maybe some problems there. But as the farther you go up along the stream, you would see that water quality is improved. So at that stage, then, Law Pro will be in a position to give us a referral to say these three streams here, the farmers that work around there, those are the farmers that we need you guys to go out and to talk to and to engage and see what the story is. So that's just a practical example of how it will work on the ground. So I suppose what we have to do then is to go and assess the farms and take into account the specific nature of each individual farm. So, you know, we're very much doing a tailored farm-specific plans for each farm. So, you know, as Joe mentioned earlier on, we're moving away from the one-size-fits-all. This is very much about getting the correct, identifying the issues and putting in the correct measure in the correct place. And this is crucial because, you know, each farmer is different. Each farmer's circumstances are different. You know, we need to make sure that we do this correctly. So in this example, we're looking at a phosphorus and sediment loss issue. And, you know, it's important to note that 3/4 of all the issues that we're finding in streams are as a result of diffuse phosphorus loss, diffuse sediment loss, and diffuse nitrogen loss. So 3/4 of what we're finding are in these three areas here. So what causes diffuse P and sediment loss? And just a little bit of recap from what Karen Daly would have done. Most losses are from low permeability soils. So when you have heavy rainfall, the soil gets saturated, and this leads to overland flow of water. And phosphorus binds tightly to the soil particles and sediments, as was explained. And, you know, P and soil sediment is washed off into the drains and streams. So what happens is a scenario like this where you have plant available phosphorus, and phosphorus is bound tightly to sediments, that you get water flowing over the surface and into streams like that. And the question is, how do we prevent that? And this is another example where we have sediment getting into a river there. So it's quite a widespread problem out there, and it's again, what do we do with a farm to try and prevent that? And this is just a quick picture of the farm assessment sheet that we use. We look at farmyard issues, we look at land management issues, we look at nutrient management issues. But in this situation, it's pretty much focusing on the land management issues, and with particular reference to phosphorus loss through overland flow and sediment loss. And once we have identified on the farm the areas where these are issues, well, then we have to come up with mitigation actions. And this is where the collaboration and the discussions really comes to the fore. So any mitigation actions we ask a farmer to take on, you know, it has to be in agreement with the farmer. So the farmer has an input into what the plan is going to be. There's no point in us asking the farmer to do something that he doesn't agree with and he hasn't any intention of doing. So we have to work with the farmer, explain why such a measure is suitable. Obviously, we have to sell it to the farmer. And look, by and large, we're getting quite a good response. With about 90% of the measures that we're asking farmers to take on, they're agreeing to take them on. So I think the process is working very well from that point of view. The mitigation actions here that we're looking at are riparian buffers, management of critical source areas, and hedgerows and infield grass buffers and sediment traps. So that's the kind of thing that we'd be looking at, and you know, a farmer would agree or not agree to those measures. So just to give the example here, this is just a farm in Donavar that we were out in previously with the group on a training day, and you have a fall. The land falls quite steeply down towards the top of the screen there, and this river at the top of the field, or that drain at the top of the field. So how will we assess that farm, and what will we look at? This is the situation on the ground, and you can see there that the stream again is along by the hedgerow, but there's a depression here in the middle of the field, that area there. So that would possibly be identified as the critical source area for that field. So all the water in that field ends up pretty much landing in that point there. So, you know, this is very much, again, getting down to the specifics of each individual farm. So this gives us a bit of information as to where we might want to try and focus our efforts with putting in the measures to prevent nutrient or prevent phosphorus and sediment loss into this stream up here, into this drain, and off down into the main stream network. So, you know, it's very important that we do this because, you know, traditionally people might have said, look, we'll go along and put a riparian margin to full into the stream, but that quite clearly isn't necessary. The riparian margin needs to be put in an area where the water can access, and that's the key area there. There's the other things that we spoke about, you know, maybe putting a hedgerow up here, that will break the flow of sediment and water from flowing over. It will delay it, it will slow it down, it will give it a chance for it to percolate it through the soil. We could also maybe put in a sediment trap here at the outfall before it joins the main river channel, and that will help to trap sediment and prevent that from getting down the stream. And we can also maybe use the whole field itself as a grass buffer by allowing the grass to get that little bit longer, grow that little bit longer over the winter period where you have the most rainfall, the most chance of sediment loss. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll be talking about with farmers. Again, it's about moving away from the one size fits all. It's putting the right measure in the right place, or the right combination of measures. And these are the airbags that we you know, that are there to, you know, where a farmer in the middle of summer might be doing everything right, and you could get a flash, a week's heavy rain, and the soil might be just gone out, and these are the airbags there to try and trap that. So I suppose the next example we'll just look at it for completeness sake is diffuse nitrogen loss. And again, a little refresher from what causes diffuse nitrogen loss. It's from free draining soils usually is where we get the most losses from. It doesn't bind tightly to the soil like phosphorus, so it's very mobile. And you get a leaching where you have more in applied than what the plant needs. And excess in, so the in that's not grown by the plants, that can be, or used by the plants, that can be leached by rain to the waters. And that's just a graphic of it. And look at, these are the phosphorus and sediment and the nitrogen. These are the three key things that we need to get across to farmers, to advisors as well, that this is what's going on out there. And if we can identify these and put in the appropriate measures to mitigate against those, well, then we're in a good place. Again, this is just a farm assessment sheet, and what we're looking at here is more on the line of nutrient use, timing of fertilizer applications and the methods and so on, the rates, and weather and fertilizer management. So just to kind of give a quick summary on that, you know, the right measure in the right place, or the correct rate of nitrogen. So it's important that we put out the correct rate of nitrogen out there, and you know, with that, maybe a accurate spreading equipment. Have them make sure we have them calibrated. You know, the right products. Looking at urea, product urea or less slurry, and adjusting your nitrogen usage based on that. That, you know, the availability of in is greater, so the chemical in can maybe dial back a bit on it. Timing is very important, particularly at the shorter periods of the year. You know, that we make sure that the ground is at the right temperature, the soil moisture deficit is correct, that we have growing periods. You know, that these are really, really important, that we get the timing correct, and this will help improve our nutrient use efficiency as well, and in the correct locations and the correct fields. So fields that are prone to leaching, and your driest fields that might be prone to leaching at certain times of the year need to be watched. Also, just to look on maybe at the tillage side of the house, that we make sure we put in the cover crops there. The root system is deeper. It mops up the excess nitrogen in the soils, and you know, autumn time is a big period for nitrogen leaching. and it's important that, insofar as we can, the tillage crops are green, or cover crops are sown in tillage areas, just to mop up that nitrogen. Just a quick look at the farm plan, and I suppose we're all familiar with the big gloss plans or reps plans back in the day, where there was pages and pages and pages of stuff. So what we wanted to do was to try and keep it as simple as ever we could. So we basically send out at least 2 pages, depending on how many maps we have. So we narrow it down to the 3, 4, maximum 5 main issues that are impacting water quality, the ones that we were absolutely sure have an impact. We get agreement on mitigation measures, and we send a letter out to the farmer just to remind them what those mitigation measures are, what the advice is around that, and then where necessary we would also send out a map similar to this kind of a map, where we would show and indicate where measures are to be input. So we want to try and keep it as simple as possible, because there's no point giving a farmer reams of pages of a plan. They just won't look at it. So we need to have it very simple. I suppose just to summarize, a couple of key points I want to get across. The challenge for us is that we get the measures implemented and maintained on farm. And we're out visiting farms, and it's important that we get these things put in, otherwise we won't see water quality improvement. And just these 2 pictures, this picture, the top picture was taken in January, the bottom picture was taken in July, a couple of weeks ago. And what I'm talking about, this farmer already had that river fenced off, but you can see the stakes have fallen down, the wire is down, the grazing is going right up to the edge of the river. It was put in, but it hasn't been maintained. So our advisor has gone out, we asked him to put it back in again, and he has it back in now at this stage. But having it back in and letting it go back the way it was is not going to improve water quality. So we need to get the measures implemented and maintained on farm, and that is crucial. All that we spoke about up to now, all the webinars that we've spoken about, we will not get water quality improvement if we don't get implementation and maintenance of these measures on farm, and it's very important that we get that. Again, just to re-emphasize, we're collaborative, we're voluntary, it's non-regulatory. Very important that we get uniform messages across from all advisors and industry, that an ASSAP advisor isn't saying one thing and then another advisor is saying something else. And again, just want to reiterate a thank you to all the farmers working with ASSAP. They have a big ask of them. I suppose they're getting feel sometimes that maybe they're being hung out to dry in a lot of things. But what we find is, once you engage with them correctly, once you explain what you're about, give them an opportunity to have an influence on what their plan is, we're getting good buy-in, we're getting good results from the point of view of that. So again, that's pretty much what I have to talk about this morning. There's a couple of web links there to the ASSAP interim report, the ASSAP webpage, and also the Signpost series webpage. And maybe if I have just enough a minute more, Mark, before I finish up, just to maybe look at this picture that I have here. It's a really good picture from the point of view that you have a river there along by the hedge. But the farmer, when we talk about putting in and maintaining and implementing and maintaining, this farmer has that stream fenced off since he was in reps. And you can see there's quite a good margin there that is providing good protection. But not only that, he has also extended that protection out past that when he cut the silage, and again even farther when he put out his slurry. So that river has been given massive protection from nutrient, phosphorus, overland flow loss, which is excellent to see. And the best thing is that he's maintaining it over a period of time. 2 other little co-benefits that Joe spoke about. We have a nice little bit of biodiversity going on here. Okay, maybe it needs to be maintained, and maybe the electric fence will get earthed, but that can be cut back and maintained. And he's also used low emission slurry spreading. So them are all important, and ASSAP advisors will certainly offer some guidance and advice on biodiversity and greenhouse gases when they're also out with the farm. So look, Mark, that's my presentation. Sorry, I might have run over slightly on it, but that's it.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Noel. Excellent presentation. And thank you both for staying on time. So if you could ask you to turn your cameras and your sound back on. Noel, what sort of engagement have you had with farmers? I mean, I see from the report that there's been 96% of farmers approached through ASSAP were engaging willingly. But what sort of what has been the reaction on the ground generally? And we've a question here as well in terms of has there been an opportunity to revisit the farms and assess what sort of uptake of the measures have been implemented on farms?
Yeah, so I suppose just to the first part of your question there, that the engagement has been quite positive. Look at, farmers, everybody is a little bit wary, at first. Well, not everybody, but sometimes farmers are a little bit wary at first. But I think that the process that we go through where we try and inform them, talk with them, explain, we're not going in pointing fingers, we're not going in accusing anybody. We're there to work with them, we're there to help them provide, come up with solutions. The collaborative, it's really important. I can't underemphasize enough or overemphasize enough the importance of that talking with farmers and coming in with them. And once you talk to them, explain and talk about what benefits this will be for agriculture in general and for their industry, that helps build the picture. It helps put them at ease. And once they're at ease, then they can understand or see why we're asking them to put in a riparian margin, why we're asking them to fence off a watercourse, because they understand then the impact that it's having. And so far so good. It's working really well, and that's down to the work of the advisors, the 20 from Teagasc, the 10 from the co-ops. They're all experienced advisors. They're used to doing this, so they're able to talk to farmers and bring them along with them. I suppose the second part of your question is we're getting back out to farms, to follow-up visits to farms to see how the level of implementation that's going on out there. So I suppose a couple of things on that. We started visiting farms last May started, so we're only just over 12 months out visiting farms. So we had started back doing the follow-up visits at the start of the year, and unfortunately COVID kicked in and we weren't able to get back out visiting farms. So the level of implementation, we haven't that fully established for the farms that we visited already. We're hoping to establish that over the summer. But that's, look at it, I've already said it before, that is absolutely crucial. We have to get implementation of these measures out there, and we will be encouraging and helping farmers as best we can to make sure that happens. Because it's one thing having good engagement and farmers getting plans, it's another thing having good implementation of measures, and that's really where it's at.
Thanks, Noel. Joe, the focus, obviously this program is largely focused on, not talking about the ASSAP program, but the Dairy Sustainability Forum is focused and driven by dairy farming sector. Are there plans to expand that to include other sectors, such as beef and sheep, for example?
I suspect that the Department of Agriculture, as it's now looking at kind of the new successor to Foodwise, Food Harvest, will be looking at similar type structures or integrating those sort of structures in a particular way. But I think there will always be a need for a particular sectoral type focus as well, because kind of where dairy is at is, in terms of kind of what the platform does and the kind of the environment sustainability pressures that present, I think are particular to dairy, and there needs to be a focus on that, as well as for the other sectors also to do their thing to a greater degree. But all within an overarching, integrated, unified approach. As I said earlier, whole of government, whole of sector is going to be our mantra for quite some time.
Okay. We have a question in here, Joe. It relates to, I suppose, the overall sustainability of the sector. The question reads, do you think that there is any correlation between the increased level of milk check payments to farmers and the overall decline in water quality, and more especially in County Cork, Limerick, Tipperary, where the level of dairy expansion has been dramatic, but the loss of habitat and water quality has also been dramatic? Should this be a measure of success for Dairy Sustainability Ireland? So quite a pointed question there.
Well, I think that we're keeping a close eye on water quality trends, and really the position had been up to relatively recently, or up to about 2 years ago, was that there had been no moving of the dial in relation to water quality. That, in other words, it was kind of fixed for the past couple of years and people couldn't make any level of improvement in relation to it. And that was part of the reason why the ASSAP program was set up, because of the fact that it was seen that the existing mechanisms weren't working. So I think that actually there hasn't been a correlation as of yet in relation to dairy intensification and decline in water quality. I think the figure on average I think there has been a kind of a beginning of a decline this year, but people don't really know the reasons why, and that's being worked on at the present to see what were the causal factors. And clearly, I think that as Noel has mentioned and as previous speakers have mentioned, I think there's a lot to be said for reducing chemical N in dairy areas. There is a lot of it being washed into streams and so on and so forth. And the inefficiency that Department of Agriculture and Teagasc have mentioned, that only about 25% of nitrogen being effective and being efficient. So I think there's a lot to be said for a straightforward focus on reducing N use. And I think that's one of the key kind of messages that the sector needs to get out there, that we need to actually just reduce the amount of N, full stop.
We've had, and Joe, I know that the Dairy Sustainability Ireland is focused on much broader issues than just water quality, greenhouse gas and biodiversity as well. The question has come up a number of times during this webinar series about the expansion in the dairy sector and how sustainable that is, the levels of expansion. What's your view on that in terms of the numbers? A lot of people we hear calling for reduction in numbers of cows in this country. What's the industry's response to that?
Well, I think that obviously that sort of the sector is going to have to respond and to comply with whatever it is that society and government and the EU asks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Whatever the state wants it gets, really, or what consumers want they get. But I think that sort of looking at it, there's kind of two elements in my head. The first is that there has to be full strategizing of the Teagasc macro at the earliest opportunity, and that's why kind of the sector needs to kind of step up to a greater degree in order to deliver the strategization of the Teagasc macro. I think that's critical. I think there has been a lot of focus in relation to herd numbers over the course of the past while. But I think over the course of the past 2 years, national herd number has been falling. So I think that, and you go back to the slide that I talked about in relation to kind of the repositioning of commercial forestry, every farm having to do woodland, every farm having to focus on the 5 sustainability pillars. And I think that when they're all kind of elements of a Rubik's Cube, and if you start twirling them all to get the right green answer to scientific standard, and the key phrase here really is scientific standard. It can't just be green rhetoric in a policy document somewhere. It actually has to be to the metrics that generally that the EPA measure. So scientific standard.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Pádraig, I see quite a lot of questions coming through there.
Certainly, Mark, there's plenty. Noel, one question just on that last image that you showed. Has that farmer experienced much of a reduction in productivity? And also then there's a question, just putting in buffer zones, sediment traps, leaving grass not grazed, etc. How are farmers, how do they feel about paying for those? And what kind of buy-in are you getting?
Yeah, so the first question there, look, I suppose there is a certain level of productivity loss there, but I suppose you could argue that might be more palatable or more acceptable of a loss than, we say, for example, if there was some major policy change in the new CAP or in the latest nitrates directive, where you might have cuts on what farmers can do. So I think it's a sensible way of doing it. It's a practical way of doing it. It's the best way of doing it in my book. And I think most farmers, when you explain the potential consequences if we don't get water quality improvement, they're open to the idea of doing this kind of a buffering, keeping back, putting in the margins. The buffers are really important. Sometimes people just play lip service to them, but it's really important that we keep back the 5 meters. The 10 meters that we put in the riparian margins to protect. Those are the airbags that we need, for the time when a farmer can get caught out. Everybody can get caught out, with weather, a downpour or whatever. So these are the airbags that you need. What was the second part of the question there again, Mark?
Just as regards the cost of implementation, you know, and you talked about maintaining those as well. Like, how do you get buy-in from the farmer to deliver on those?
Yeah, so look at when you'd be surprised at how little costs there is to when we hand over a plan to a farmer. You know, it's very rare that we'd be asking a farmer to put up a big capital investment into something, you know, for example, as a tank or something like that, because what we're finding is that farmyard point source is not as big an issue as people would imagine. It's more diffuse. So what we're talking about here really is practice change and behavior change. So, you know, we're talking about the shorter periods of the year that you put out. If the ground conditions and if the soil temperatures are not correct, that you do not go out with your nitrogen until they provide that. Otherwise, it's lying there and it has a chance of being leached. You know, likewise at the back end of the year, that you know, instead of going out to the 15th of September, that if the ground conditions and the soil temperature and the soil moisture deficit is not appropriate, well, then you don't go out with it. You know, so these are important messages. So there is a little bit of capital cost on some things that we ask farmers to do, but it's not massive. You know, it's by and large it's quite cheap. It's the most expensive thing that we're probably asking people to do is actually put up fences and put up you know, fence off cattle and maybe put in alternative drinking supplies. On occasions there may be some farm roads that are having an impact, but those are going to have to be moved anyway from the 1st of January next year with regards to the regulation. So, you know, that they're going to be bound by those anyway. So look, the cost of what we're asking farmers to do is not massive at all. You know, it's more behavior change and practice change and doing their things differently, as opposed to putting in massive expensive infrastructure.
No, you mentioned like the positive impacts you're having on farm. Do you have any stats on kind of quantifying the positive impact you're having at farm level? And then you also said that you're moving away from a one size fits all. And how do you scale that up to a national level, or is it possible?
Yeah, well, I suppose that look, we're going to. Part of this series, the reason why we had the series and why we had the webinars that we had was to provide a level of information to the advisory service that's out there. And the ASSAP advisors are focused in 190 areas for action, but you know, that's 40,000 farmers, give or take, right? And we wouldn't even be meeting all those 40,000 farmers, which just would not be possible. So we need the existing advisory service to take on the messages that we're trying to get out there. And ask that they make their farmers aware of these things. That's why I spoke about the uniform messaging from across all the industry and all the advisors. So that's really an important thing to do, Pádraig. I suppose, you know, what we have at the minute is we know the level of measures that we're asking farmers to do. So on average, there's about six issues per farm that we're finding. So we go out and visit a farm, we see about 6 issues that we're asking a farmer that we say are having a definite impact on water quality. And through the process of discussion and speaking with the farmer, we come up with a plan and something that the farmer's happy with. And, you know, we send it off with him and let him implement that as he goes along. And, you know, your previous question about implementation, you know, we haven't got final figures on that yet, or we have some figures on that, and by and large we're seeing that things are progressing along. That farmers are implementing things in the farms that we've reassessed, but across the whole of the farmers, we don't have that yet because it just takes time to get through this.
Just a question here, Noel, and Joe, you might want to come in on this as well. I mean, how do you see the likes of the ASSAP program engaging or interacting with the likes of a future agri-environmental scheme or eco scheme from the department or under the new CAP?
Yeah, I suppose, look at, I think there are learnings from the ASSAP program that are out there, Mark. I think, you know, we have kind of 2 things going on here, and Ginny D can kind of allude to it early on. You have the nitrogen losses that are in the free draining soils area, and then you have your phosphorus and sediment losses in the more heavier soils around the border areas and the west and some parts of the southwest as well, and the northeast as well around Meath. So, you know, you have 2 things going on here. So, you know, maybe we need to look at how we tailor our schemes, or what measures are appropriate for a nitrogen loss situation, what measures are appropriate for a phosphorus loss situation, and that we try and come up with plans or ways of helping farmers to implement measures that will look at that. Another thing that I think that's going to become very important down the line is the identification of critical source areas. I know there's a project going on out there. Ian Thomas and UCD is working on it with the EPA, and I think the findings that are going to be, are really, really important to help to give the tools to the advisor to be able to identify key areas on farms. Again, it's instead of going to the one size fits all, it's identifying key areas, critical source areas that have the potential impact on water quality. I think one other thing there that maybe needs to be looked at is the socioeconomic aspect of this. Part-time farming, farmers that are marginal, have they got the age profile of farmers, the succession of farmers? So I'm thinking of, maybe an elderly farmer in the west of Ireland that doesn't have a successor, there's low profitability, no help to do things. Can we ask the same things of that farmer that we'd be asking a younger farmer? How do we help that older farmer to fence off streams? He may need help to do that. He may need money to do that. How do we help farmers in those kind of disadvantaged, poor socioeconomic circumstances that people find? And the part-time farmer as well, he's working maybe 5 or 6 days a week, from 8 to 7. How is he supposed to maintain his farm to the standard that we're asking to do that? So is there an area there that we need to look at which try and help that then kind of cohorts of farmers? So I suppose it's about identifying the different cohorts that are out there and tailoring the advice and the help and the assistance and the schemes to meet those cohorts.
Joe, do you have any comments on that, just on the policy side?
I think that there is something to be said for upskilling the ASSAP advisors in relation to things like biodiversity and climate change. I think that is kind of inevitable. But more broadly, I think there is more to be said for upskilling the existing entire knowledge transfer cohort across the state for the entire Teagasc advisory system to integrate sustainability for every single Teagasc advisor. Same for the Department of Ag. Same for the private advisors who are out there. There's quite a big cohort of private advisors. And for every farm-facing element of the co-ops as well, that everybody incorporates and internalizes and advises and knowledge transfers and networks in relation to good sustainability practice. It can't just be down to the ASSAP guys. They're too small. It's too small a cadre. It needs everybody.
Porrick, lots of questions.
There's lots of questions there, Mark. Yeah. Joe, another one for you. You quoted a figure of 14% for, I suppose, optimum soil fertility. You mentioned that there's some distance to go before all the soils are at peak productivity. Is that not going against sustainability principles? Peak productivity sounds like more fertilizers are needed. Please explain what you mean. I guess they're looking at the biodiversity of soils. If you'd like to comment on that, Joe, please.
I guess this was a big surprise to me when I started to look at this about 2 years ago, that the actual structure of the soil, because the pH is wrong, most of the soils are in the wrong productivity elements just by virtue of the structure themselves. And you can fix the pH and the structure of the soil by changing the pH. And that is about lime, which is very, very cheap. And if you get the pH of your soil right, then you don't need chemical N to the same degree. So I think that really is where there's a huge win. And that's why kind of the program, why there is kind of compulsory liming programs now for derogation farmers. But I think all farmers need to look at lime to a far greater degree and to move away rather substantially from the use of chemical N and to use their manure and their slurry and so on and so forth in a more focused way. But I think that there's a huge win there without losing productivity. It isn't just about firing chemical N out all over the place. It can't be that anymore.
Okay, you mentioned, Joe, the sustainability bonuses from Dairy Gold and the biodiversity bonus from Glanbia. What was the kind of the uptake, well, not the uptake, but how were they received by farmers? And do you think that's something that we're going to see more of in the future?
I think they were well received, and I think that it has to be in the policy mix, that farmers have to be rewarded for what they do. That has been kind of the language, both in relation to CAP and in relation to grant schemes and so on and so forth, but equally in relation to checks from the co-ops. So I think it'll have to be in the mix. There has to be discussion on this kind of as a kind of support to farmers.
Unfortunately, time is against us, gentlemen. It's hard to believe the hour has gone. We have really a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get to today. But what I can say is that we are going to study the questions, because there are some really thought-provoking questions coming in through today. So we'll circulate them amongst the panel. We'll discuss and hopefully get back to people if where necessary.
Mark.
Yes,
Sorry,
of course. Oh, yeah.
I just had a quick look at one of the questions. Somebody asked, are we only dealing with dairy farmers? No, we deal with all farmers.
Yeah, that's an important
It's not just dairy, it's all farmers. So
and you're also working in collaboration with the farm organisation as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the farm orgs have been brilliant, you know, that they have really got behind us, and, you know, their impact locally has really helped our engagement with the farmers, you know, so, you know, they've all stepped up to plate in this one, Mark.
Okay.
Just to mention, when I mentioned firing out fertilizer, I used the wrong phrase. I just meant sort of the nutrient use efficiency. My apologies. It's like
that's no problem at all. Thanks for that clarification, Joe. Noel, thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for your presentation. Pádraig, thanks for helping with the questions today. And thank you for tuning in, our audience, for a lot of repeat viewers this week. So it's great to have so many people joining us every week. Just to remind you that the presentation is available on the Teagasc will be available shortly on the Teagasc website. I want to thank our production team, Andy Boland, Pat Murphy, Yvonne Maher, and of course Noel for assisting with this part of the series as well. We'll be with you next week again at the same time. Just to remind you, if you want to avail of the Teagasc Connected, you can sign up to Teagasc Connected today for free by going to the Teagasc website and teagasc.ie/connected. And you can avail of a free newsletter, monthly newsletter, which gives you updates on new webinars and activities that are happening that Teagasc is broadcasting over the coming weeks and months ahead. So with that, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again next Friday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.